I'm really delighted to have as a guest here tonight a bloke who's been around politics at an elected level for as long as I've been stuffing stuff in letterboxes. I started that in 1974. This bloke entered the State Parliament of Queensland that year, and he's still active and doing things in the federal parliament, the one, the only, the great Bob Katter Jr. Great to have you on the program, Bob.
Great honour to be with you.
Well, what is going on? Is the parliament, the mess we've seen there, really a reflection of what's gone wrong in our society? We've kind of lost our way, haven't we?
Every week I would interface with maybe 200 people, and I ask them a question. I say, if you're the boss of Australia, what's the first thing you do? They will say, 1, build the nation, 2, own the nation. Exactly what you were saying. Everyone. I would say 97% of people say exactly what you said.
Yeah.
But that connection in Canberra does not exist. We have spent the last, year, nothing to do with the government of Australia. And Gary, Jockey Pearson used to have a saying. He said, Bob, you must feed the chooks. And I used to add to
I was a chook once, Bob, okay.
but you would appreciate this. I added to that. You feed the chooks so they'll feed on you.
Yeah.
And what you are watching is a reactionary government, not a proactionary government. You're watching a reactionary government and the chooks are feeding on them day after day.
Yeah.
You've got to get out there positively and build the nation, and water is a good place to start.
Well, vision is a big thing, isn't it? So, the need to build our national sovereignty, because I am... If anybody asks me what keeps me awake at night, it's the national sovereignty question, Bob. You've got islands off the coast of Queensland being sold off and hived off or rented off by the Queensland government, the same in Western Australia, ports in Darwin, the whole state of Victoria. Our national sovereignty is at risk.
I was absolutely staggered at the Drew Pavlov case in the Queensland University. And now that I'm looking at it, our entire information, defence system information, is owned by a Chinese company. And I mean, Andrew Wilkie, the Independent, was seconding my motion. He said you couldn't dream up this story. No one would believe.
You couldn't make it up, could you?
You couldn't make it up.
No.
But remember this, Gary, that if you take a narrow band, I call it the golden nulla from Cairns, Sydney, Melbourne to Adelaide, take that out, 100 kilometres wide, and take out a little dot around Perth. You've got 93% surface area of Australia, occupied less than 1 million people. Right? In a world where nearly 2,000 million people go to bed hungry every night, we have, if we were a separate country, North Queensland and the Gulf Carpentaria, Northern Territory area, we would be the wettest country on earth. We are not using, we're using less than 0.5% of that water runoff, Gary.
Yeah.
0.5%. 28% is the average for the world. And funnily enough, the rest of Australia, 28%. But in North Queensland, nothing at all. We can give you 200,000 people and the Midwest, my old home country, between Mount Isa and Townsville and the Gulf country. We'll give you 200,000 people if you give us a Ewan scheme. And I've got to be fair to the Prime Minister and say the Ewan scheme has got 200 million.
Yeah. And
we need another 200 million and we'll start working on that. But, the Prime Minister's got to be seen to be doing that. The politics of this situation is you are reactionary. You don't feed the chooks, as you were saying.
Yeah.
The chooks will feed on you, and that's what's happening.
But you've been a minister at the state level, so you understand the responsibilities of state government. You've been a long-term member of the federal parliament, the Australian parliament, so you understand both. There's this kind of blame Canberra for everything that you don't like and take praise for everything you do like at the state level. And the feds just seem to be paralysed, don't seem to want to actually get on with the business of maybe kicking the sand in a few of the state bullies' faces, if I'm allowed to use that metaphor. We've got to get on with stuff.
I've got to be careful what I say here, but I've done my best to communicate to the Prime Minister and the Treasurer, right, the leadership, if you like, of the government, that you've got to get out there and build Australia and own Australia. You forget about this silly, stupid free market rubbish, which no other country on earth involves in. Let me just come back to China for a moment. There is only one development plan current for all of that third of Australia, the Northern Territory and Western Australia. There's only one project, which is the Ord River, Stage 2 and Stage 3. It was given to China, not sold, given to China. Andrew Robb, of course, sold the Darwin port to the Chinese, and then went on.
Signed off by the territory
880,000
government, if I remember rightly. But
and the territory government, absolutely right. Right. But you sit back and allow it to happen. Gary, you made reference to islands, right? There will be some absolutely startling revelations that we do not move until we've got absolute proof. And we've got proof, but not absolute proof. So just give me an extra fortnight and there will be startling. But do you need any more startling revelations? That third of Australia is gone. There's no one there except the Chinese owning the port, and the only development project is owned by China. I mean, the whole of Australia is an empty country, and it's what little population is there is rapidly emptying. And the answer is water, of course, and Dr. Bradfield wasn't exactly an idiot.
no, he wasn't.
The water supply system for Sydney today was what he put in place back in the 20s.
Yeah.
The transportation system, the underground railway system, won the World Prize for Engineering the year it was built. Bradfield again. The Sydney Harbour Bridge, the Story Bridge here, the University of Queensland. Not exactly an idiot, was he?
No, certainly not.
So you were out there promoting it,
Yeah.
and this bloke was not a fool.
Well, look, I mean, if you've got great people like Sir Frank Moore, who've been around a long, long time, who also wants to see these things
Sir Leo
happen.
Hilscher.
Sir Leo Hilscher, I mean, these blokes don't
Great
need to
man.
do it. They don't need to do this. They want to do it because they want Australia to be in a better place in the years to come. I do too. I think you do as well. I mean, this is kind of where we're at now as a country. What I'm not hearing is that language about where is Australia going to land? Where's that water where and when you need it? Where is the cheaper power? Where is the growth for the regions? They want to send people out to the regions, but unless it's BYO water, no one's going to stay, Bob.
Gary, people should be taught geography at school. You know, they think when we talk about water development, we're going to cut down some trees, right? Well, I hope so, because there's 10 million hectares of prickly trees, which are destroying
Prickly
the entire
acacia,
flora, prickly acacia, all of the flora and fauna. It is regarded as the greatest environmental holocaust in the nation's history, and I think that's a fair call. So you cut down those trees and you line our riverbanks with pasture permanently. You are growing our land instead of ripping it to pieces. We have that water, but it's only there for 2 or 3 months, and it rips and tears everything to pieces on its rampage to the sea.
Yeah, and it'll take 3 months for the water to get to Menindee Lakes, for instance, and the Darling I was reading today. So look, so we're not talking that. Instead, we're talking all this stuff about really basic failures of decent standards. Oh, they're not old-fashioned standards. Surely they must be contemporary standards. The parliament you now sit in seems to be reflecting the mess of society at the moment. Surely we can get this dealt with and tidy the place up a bit. Surely. Have you ever seen anything as bad as this?
I was really surprised when I read Rod Cavalier's book, ALP New South Wales, Mark Latham's book, and probably most of all Hugh Mackay, Reimagining Australia. They talked about spiritual values, and there is a complete absence. We might not believe in God or eternity or go to church on Sundays, but you're brought up with Christian values. That has been replaced by the love of trees and sacrificing human beings to the crocodile gods and the tree gods. And that's quite literally true. But it's not new. I mean, the northern German tribes, the Druids in England, the Egyptians were sacrificing to the crocodile gods and the tree gods. So it's not new. But I think Christianity is a much better way to travel philosophically, even if you don't want the religion part of it.
Well, doing to others as you'd like them to do to you is a pretty good mantra. But the Prime Minister is in a real bind, according to the media. The media and this sort of instantaneous media environment we live in right now, the Prime Minister is in, he's got to make very strong determination, changes to his ministry coming. Peter Dutton into defence, maybe looking after our national sovereignty as well, making defence a thing about making sure Australia is in a strong position to take on the sort of threats that we're facing. Might not be a bad look.
In fairness to Scott Morrison, he ordered Global Switch to be kicked out. Right? I mean, the entire information systems of our defence forces, and the head of the defence force is a bloke that's just got to go. But it's in the hands of a Chinese. The government owns a third of that. The government of China is the People's Liberation Army. So, I mean, with People's Liberation Army owning the information for the defence system of the country. But, you know, look at that third of Australia, the Northern Territory and Western Australia. You know, the only thing that is owned there or happening there, the poor first Australian people are not allowed to have title deeds, so they can't do anything with the land they supposedly own, except they're not allowed to touch the ground, take a rock out of it, or take a bucket of water out of the river, or cut down a tree. Apart from that, they own it. Yeah. So you've got that land, and the rest of the land, I think, will progressively be owned by China, unless there is an aggressive Australianism, and that is lacking. Gary, your introduction to this was, you were speaking on behalf of the 25 million people in Australia when you said that, except the 200 or 300 that are in that Parliament of Australia.
Yeah.
And that is not a message getting through there at all.
All right. Bob Catter, good to see you. Take care. Thanks very much for your time tonight.
Great honour to be on your program.
Good on you, Bob Catter, member for Kennedy. You're very welcome anytime.